How many of you are here for the first time? Okay, welcome. Good to see you all. I always have a lot of new ones, a lot of new people. Any of you at the expo last November? Oh, great. Yeah, I remember you being there. Just you? You too? Okay. All right. So that was our fourth expo. So we have a lot of events here as our organization, and so this organization we call Flower of Life Center has been here since, I don't know, 5 years or so. Oh, actually about 6 years. And in my former life, I was living a very different life. The gentleman who was sitting in the front row was from my former life. I used to be a professional trader, and I ran a trading organization, international trading organization. So I used to teach people how to trade the markets at a professional level. So people like him were members of my organization. Very few of them have actually traveled to this new life. Obviously, most people who are in the trading world are not particularly interested in spiritual growth, nor do they have the conscious awareness a lot of times. But there are a few. So in my former life, I lived a much more mainstream type of life. And in 2010, the end of 2010, I had another spiritual awakening that launched me in this direction. And our organization was founded soon after that. And so we've been doing various events here in Michigan for many years, and then we started doing an expo, which this November we just did our fourth one. So the expo is a larger manifestation of our organization. So we do local events here, but then the expo we bring in presenters from all over the world. And it's not a Michigan event, although we hold it in downtown Detroit. It's we have people who travel in from all parts of the world and all parts of the U.S. to attend it. So it's a very unusual event. It's very consciousness based, as is everything that we do. And although we have sometimes we have scientists and geneticists there, we had archaeologists this last one. The underlying thread of it is a manifestation of awakening of consciousness. So everything that we do has that foundational principle to it. And now in my personal work, so we have the expo, which is another side of what we do. Our local events is another one. We're going to bring more events to the local area in the near future. Actually, in January, I'll be doing a lecture that is similar to one that I did at the expo. In my personal work, one of the things that I do, other than the energy transfer, which we'll be doing here today, is I help light workers like Michaela to discover their gifts, develop them, and to bring them out into the world in a way that people will embrace it and enjoy it and experience it. So in that work, I represent a lot of people in various different alternative modalities, channeling being one of them. I gave a lecture at the expo about how you can discover your life mission and how you can take it out into the world that in a way that will not only support you financially, but will also help change the world in a very positive way. So that's what I try to do in the work that I do. So bring someone like Michaela to the world by helping her to change the world and to impact people's lives. I can further my own personal mission as well. So it's something that I would recommend all of you consider, because I think a lot of people get very focused on their day-to-day life and going to work and making money and paying their bills, and they forget that there is something more meaningful that they've not pursued. You can certainly still go to work and make money, but it's also important to have a life mission, something that's greater than you, and something that you'll leave behind after you've left this incarnation. Not for the egocentric purpose of that, but really because by doing that, you live a life that has a bigger impact. So if you ask yourself the question, what can I do in this world that's true to who I am, that's big enough that will impact many generations after I'm gone, then the answer to that question is the direction where you should focus your life. Not because of the reason of making money or because of being famous, but because a mission that big is something worthy of your incarnation here. So that's something that I aspire to help people to do, because if I can get all of you to do that, as an example, imagine how much better the world would be if all of you were living a mission that big that would impact many people's lives for generations after you're gone. So I'll be giving a lecture about that. It does get a little bit technical because I do get into some business and branding and things like that. Previously, in my former life, I did also own a branding marketing agency as well. So I have a lot of background in business and marketing and things like that. So everything that we do here as an organization, we're trying to bring these ideas and concepts that are on the fringe of society as a whole into the mainstream awareness in a way that the mainstream audience will appreciate it, value it, and be able to understand it on a level that they can understand. So that's why we do things in a highly professional way. Our next expo is November of 2017. We do have tickets at a discount right now. Actually, during the Christmas week, we'll have them at a further discount. So if you want to buy them before the end of the year, I think they're going to be $125 for Christmas week for 2 tickets. So, and then after that, they'll go up to $250. So per ticket, by the way. So if you want to do that, it's a 3-day event. It starts Friday night and goes all the way through Sunday. We have all kinds of speakers and workshops. And so if you like today, then that's really today, but much more intense. And even at our event, we have a lot of people working behind the scenes to maintain the vibration. So just the people on our stage are not the only people who are there to enhance the experience. It's not an educational event, although we have a lot of very educational presentations there. It's a vibrational event, so you won't really know what it's like until you've been there. So we have that. We are now, as an organization, about to go in umpteen different directions. So we have an international presence. We have Awaken Empower TV, which is a show that I do that broadcasts out of a network in the UK. Any of you watch the show? Okay. And Michaela's show, today's recording will be on there. But I have different guests on the show, and so that show is watched internationally. We're about to launch a community project to bring together, because a lot of times over the years we've heard those of you, for example, in this audience, as you're awakening, there are not a lot of people in the world you can relate to, and of course your families may not understand you or your perceptions of the world, and so we're trying to create a local and global community to help those of you in that who are becoming aware to connect with others, to work together, to become friends, to maybe even relationship partners, things like that. So that's a project we're about to launch. We have our Conscious Youth Program, Michaela mentioned earlier, which is for kids 9 to 18, and we are eventually going to launch it as a school, a K through 12 school. We have a magazine that is currently online, with articles from different experts, and like some of the presenters at our expo write for us, and Michaela channels messages for the magazine as well. And then we have, what else do we have? And we have so many things going on these days. I mean, there's an architectural project that is that's going to probably start this year, ultimately to create a physical place for our programs. We used to have one once, but we're going to build an actual physical structure that has a vibrational resonance to it, so that while you're sitting in there, it's going to have a healing effect, and it'll also resonate that effect to the environment. So that's in the works. It's a little bit farther down the line, but we are planning that, and that's where our school will be for kids, and all those kind of things. And I know there are other projects I'm not remembering, but there are many members of our team now. Our team has grown quite substantially over the years, and if you'd like to join us, it's a volunteer-based organization. We do have a lot of roles that we need to have filled, from running the expo to the youth program, to the community project, and umpteen other things. So if you're interested in that, you can speak with Michaela or me, or just send us an email and we'll get you connected. So any questions about anything so far? So this is basically, we'll go for about 2 hours, hour 45 minutes. And at about 4 o'clock, we'll do the actual energy transfer. Any of you not familiar with it at all? Or never heard of it first time? Never done it? Okay. Okay, so this is something that we started doing, an event that we started doing about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
So like, it's hard to keep track.
Yeah. So, and it's something that, I come from, although I've always had a spiritual awareness, I come from an intellectual left brain background. And I was a trader and a business guy for many years. So because of that, I still have a rational side to me. And so even though I am these days fully immersed in this field of consciousness and surrounded by people like Barb and Michaela and others who defy the left brain intellectual side of me, but at the same time I try to bring those kinds of subjects to a intellectual perspective so that people can understand it on that level. But because of that, I tend to test things and validate things so that it makes sense to me. So when I first started doing this event, and Barb can tell you more about herself and her part of the story later, but she was really responsible for me stepping into this role and doing this. And so when I met her, that awareness made me decide to put on these events. And so we've been doing it for many years, at least once a month, most of the time. And at first it was just purely an experiment to see what would happen if I got a group of people together in a room and did this thing with energy. Now, I don't consider myself a healer. My work is entirely focused in the field of consciousness. So although some of you with physical problems may experience a change in your health, that's not really why I'm here. I'm here to raise your consciousness and to help you to trigger your awakening. And in some cases, that awakening may be you realize your life mission and your purpose here. And as Michaela said earlier, people who are on our team inevitably find their way to their life mission and their gifts and things like that. It just happens because of that energy. So because I'm these days surrounded by very gifted people, I've had the opportunity to speak with this collective consciousness that facilitates what you will experience today. But ultimately, it's to raise your vibration and to remove some of the dense energetic vibration that you're carrying in your energy body that's preventing you from stepping into your potential. So that's what we're going to do today. So we've been doing this for many years in groups, and after a while I got asked to be on radio shows and telesummits, and so now there are a group of people who are in my advanced program around the world who I facilitate this process remotely with. And I do have YouTube videos of events like this that have been posted online, and people who watch the videos experience similar benefits as what you'll experience here today. Now, I can't say for sure they're the same benefits or not, but if you read the comments on the videos, you'll see a lot of people are having some pretty amazing experiences. So you can certainly supplement what you're experiencing here today by watching the videos. But the more often you can do this, the more beneficial it will be for you. And being a left brain intellectual guy, it took a long time for me to accept that this was really happening, and a lot of it came through the various feedback we've received from people all over the world. So, any questions so far?
Mm-hmm. Earlier, there was the conversation about, regardless, this is how I heard it, regardless of the amount of healing that we think we've done with some of the imprints and things that we've taken on through our lifetime, is your work part of releasing those type of things? Because I got the impression as I was listening earlier is no matter what you do, there's still this consciousness living in you that is there. I don't know if I'm asking the right question, but
consciousness.
So like the imprints of some traumatic things that I have then kept alive in me.
Right.
And I think I've resolved, yet it keeps coming back and biting me. Is that the kind of work that you're talking about,
Sure.
that you are able to do based on our intention of releasing that?
Sure. Now, not all of you are ready to release everything, and most of you are not, and most of you shouldn't, because that amount of release in one step would be true traumatic change. So that's why I suggest you do it as often as you can, because each time you'll release a little bit more. So let me talk a little bit about me and how that works. So I had an awareness even prior to meeting Barb and doing these group sessions, which for me was, like, as I said, experimental in the beginning, just to see what would happen. I had an awareness because I've had a lot of very unusual things happen throughout my life. Even while I was living a very intellectual left brain life, there are a lot of unusual things that happened that I sort of put on the shelf as that didn't really happen because it didn't make any sense. And But I had the sense that I had the ability to take on the negative energy, and I use the word negative not in a negative sense, but basically the negative energy of other people and environments and neutralize them in some way. I always knew that because of things that happened in my life. And so when we started doing this in groups, that was the intention that I set, was I was going to try to see what would happen. And because of Barb's gifts, to be able to see energy, I was able to validate that that was actually what was happening. So it was the first time I actually had evidence of what I felt that I was doing. So this physical body, so I was born with this ability. So it wasn't something I accumulated later. This physical body has the ability to neutralize adverse or negative energies in environments. So if I'm in a space with electromagnetic fields neutralize or geopathic stress or anything like that. I've been tested by dowsers and a variety of people over the years, Aura photography, and I've also had Michaela channel for me about the gifts, and also had an opportunity to speak with the collective consciousness of beings that work through this physical body to facilitate this process today. So in about a half an hour, I will ask you to send your negative energy to me, and or karmic energy. So when I'm using that word, when I use karma, I'm referring to vibration, of vibrational energy. It doesn't necessarily only mean something you did in a past life or some kind of past life trauma that you carried into this one. It can be that too, but it could also be the product of negative thinking in this life. It could be the product of poor health choices. It could be the product of drinking fluoridated water, or anything that's, all of those things create a density in your energy field that limits your awakening and prevents you from stepping into who you came here to be, and can also cause health problems. So when I ask you to send that to me, then as you do that, that's no longer with you. So this is, and because we are at a time in the awakening of consciousness now where we are being asked to grow faster, this opportunity for you to release an immense amount of karmic energy is available to you now. It hasn't been available in the past. So you can today go away from here feeling dramatically lighter than you ever have felt, and that you ordinarily would not be able to release in one step. Now, will that mean you'll release everything? Probably not. In some of your cases, you may wish to hold on to some of that, consciously or unconsciously, and but as you're ready, you can release that. Yes, and whether if you've done it before and you feel like there's still something holding on, yes, we can remedy that. At the same time, I'll be raising your consciousness today, and Barb can see energy fields, so she's here to assist with that and also show us what's going on in the room from an energetic standpoint. And she does this amazing workshop at the expo too, so if you ever get a chance to attend that, it's usually full house, and she's got a line out the door most. So she's very popular. A lot of people travel from out of state just to come see.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So she's quite famous. So it's an amazing treat to have someone like that, and And we try to bring people who are really exceptional. I mean, the kind of people you see on our on our stage at the expo or here are those who are becoming international figures and very, very gifted in their individual areas. In the next several months, we'll probably also bring. Any of you know who Ken Chorley is? He's a telekinetic, so we may be bringing him here to do some telekinesis demonstrations as well. So different people we'll bring on stage. But these are all individuals who are exceptional in their own fields of work and doing things that not a lot of people are out there doing. So, questions so far? Anything?
I just want to add to her question. I think I can phrase it differently because you're asking about all that. They were talking about programming and all that stuff. And so what Ethann does in his energy transfer is he raises consciousness, which is a raise in dimension, which is what the guys are talking about. And we have history that's replaying, or we have those imprints or programs who are actually existing in the same dimension, and that's why we're experiencing them over and over again the same way. So what his process does is it'll actually raise your dimension, raise your vibration, so that you perceive those things differently and you can't replay them again. Right? Even though they're part of, he's getting rid of the dead stuff, and you're able to perceive it through different eyes, which actually heals it. That's the way I interpret that.
Right. That's good. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Basically, so it's a two-step process. One, we're going to remove the density, but the other part, we're going to, you're sitting in this room, I use this example a lot, you're sitting in this room with all kinds of different frequencies of energy present in the same space. So in this space, there are radio transmissions and cellular transmissions and satellite transmissions, and they all are coexisting in this space, but you don't see them, you don't hear them. You all have cell phones, but if somebody calls you, everybody else's phone doesn't ring. It's because your phone is tuned to a specific narrow band of information in the sea of information that's around you. But in this space also exists all of time. Everything that ever happened, everything that ever will happen, every thought that has ever been thought or ever will be thought is all coexisting here. So, but you don't all perceive all of those things, but it is still here. But what determines how you look, what kind of health problems you may or may not have, how long you live, the thoughts you think, how successful you are in your life is all dependent on where you've got the frequency set in your own vibrational body that tunes into all that narrow band of information in this field. So each of you looks different because you're tuning into a subtly different aspect of that energy. And so if you have experiences from the past, or let's say in this life, so in this life, there are Democrats and Republicans and people who fight in wars and people who are all about peace, all very different frequencies of awareness. Well, they all coexist in this same world, but they're living in slightly different dimensional realities. So in the world that I live, I'm surrounded by people like you, and yet I once lived in a world where I was surrounded by professional traders. So slightly different shift of frequency of that sea of information. So today, one of the things we'll do is we're going to change that dial a little bit inside each of you so that you're going to leave here tuning in on a subtly different dimensional reality. The repercussions of that are you'll start thinking differently about the world you're living in. You'll start tuning in to information that was always there but you didn't know. You may find that you're not interested in the people you've been hanging around with up till now, and you'll start a whole new social group. A lot of relationships break up because of this, so that's my disclaimer if you don't want that. Because quite often one partner will come and the other partner won't, and one partner will shift dimensions and the other partner won't, and then suddenly they are not even communicating on the same level anymore. And so that will cause a separation between people. So we are going to shift that. It doesn't necessarily mean it will happen, but quite often it does happen. So so as you're tuning in a new frequency, it's like changing channels on a satellite TV. You've got thousands of channels there, but when you change, so somebody over here may be watching a war movie and somebody over here is watching a comedy. They're still watching the same television and all the channels are available, but they're tuning into different dimensions, different dimensional realities. This is why I can live in a world where I'm surrounded by people like you and Michaela and Barb, where other people, they're all about the election and the president and war and these kind of things. They're all coexisting with us. So we are going to adjust that, and it will change many things in your life.
Akashic records, similar to past, present, and all that. Do you want to just, is that a broad concept term, and how do you view that term, or you don't work with that, or what?
In what
Akasha.
I know what the Akashic
Yeah.
records are, but
Right.
well, I mean, how do I view that term?
No, just as far as is that still applicable to what you're talking about?
Well, sure. I mean, that may be a question better for Anya, who speaks on those subjects. She's usually here, but not today.
You talking about the energy transfer? Or not just
No, just general.
In general, what I think about, do I think it's real?
Oh, I'm sure you do. But
Yes.
of course. Past, present, future, all being contained here,
Right.
and all around.
Well,
Access.
okay, so part of the challenge of being human beings is, as we chose to be human beings, we chose to have time. And so we're here in a material dimension that vibrates at a certain frequency. In order to experience this reality, we have time. And so in this reality, there was yesterday, and there is a tomorrow, and there is a now, and they're three separate things. But in reality, this is just one version of reality, there is no time. So Akashic records are a ever-changing, malleable thing. So in that sense, if I change something in me now, then I also affect my past as much as I affect my future. It's easy for us to understand that if I change something now, so if I go and I get a haircut, then my haircut's going to be cut tomorrow, right? So in terms of time, what I do today affects my future. But another thing you want to understand is that what you do today also affects your past. Not only this past, but past lifetimes. So let's say, for example, you had a past lifetime that you're aware of where you suffered because of something. And a lot of light workers do have that kind of a lifetime. You can solve that problem in this life. And in so doing, that past life also solves itself. So Akashic records and karma and those kind of things, you don't have to necessarily, they are all coexisting. They're all affecting one another. So the past is not the only thing affecting the future. So if you have a past life, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're doomed because it was a bad past life or a difficult one. You can just as easily work on this one and repair the past, as well as you can go into that past life and repair that and work on this one. Does that answer the question? Sort of? Okay. So,
Thank you.
yeah. So, I mean, in terms of time is a mental construct of this reality, but it's becoming less and less relevant. So, as we go into, so now there's a lot of talk about fourth dimension, fifth dimension. As we go into fifth dimensional awareness, which is, it's coming in slowly, we're going to have to cross through fourth dimension. And so fourth dimension is sort of where we are now. And as we go into fourth dimension, time is going to become less relevant. And when we get to fifth dimension, there won't be any time. We know we're not in fifth dimension yet because right now we still perceive of time. And we still carry around phones with clocks on them. So fifth dimension isn't quite here yet. But in fifth dimension, there is no time. And you can't, your left brain intellectual sides cannot perceive a fifth dimension. So there's no sense in me trying to explain to you what fifth dimension is like, because you wouldn't understand it even if I could possibly explain it. Because it takes a whole nother level of awareness. So in that sense, part of what we're doing here today is we are shifting that level of awareness so that the new version of you that will leave here today is a version of you that will not have understood concepts that the earlier version of you, or rather will understand concepts that the early version of you that came here today would not have understood. So you may find yourself having aha moments or understanding about things that you previously just had no idea about. So in little steps like that, we are moving toward fifth dimensional awareness. And you can already see fourth dimension. Can all of you see fourth dimensional things happening in your world now? Or is that, no? You can't. Okay, so fifth dimension, there's no time. There's no separation between us, right? Now, obviously, that doesn't exist yet in entirety, and some people are experiencing it more than others. But fourth dimension is this in-between world where time is becoming less and less and less. So we previously had a big awareness of time. Fifth dimension, there is no awareness of time. In fourth dimension, time is slowly going away. And one way you can look at that is in third dimension, you think a thought and it slowly manifests over time and then it becomes tangible. So for example, if I want to buy a white car of a certain brand, then I think about that white car, I go test drive that white car, I apply for a loan or whatever, and I get the car, and finally the car is delivered, now it's in my driveway and I have this white car. So a certain amount of time had to take place between the thought and the material reality of that white car. But we're starting to see in our world that time is shortening. And you can see that even in technology. So for example, they can print cars now using 3D printing. So if you think about that, now you think about the car and it can print in front of you. So very soon, in the not too distant future, you may not have to go to a dealership to buy a car. You may just be able to order a car online and it just manifests in front of you. So we've been talking about manifestation for many, many years, where people are talking about, well, how do I make my thoughts manifest? Well, because there's time, thoughts take time to manifest. But as time goes away, thoughts take less time to manifest. And so there are companies now that are working on using stem cells to actually 3D print organs. So you'll be able to have organs that are 3D printed. So we're talking about thoughts manifesting into reality almost instantaneously. So time is becoming less and less. That's one example of these things happening in our world. They'll be able to 3D print food, so you don't have to prepare food. I mean, some of you watch Star Trek and replicators that they make food. That's becoming real, where they can use proteins now, actually, to 3D. Well, of course, mainstream thinking they 3D printed hamburgers, but anyhow, they can 3D print a hamburger now. So if you think about it, we're not that far off from being able to instantly manifest anything we want into our three-dimensional reality. So that is a fourth dimensional vibration coming into being, which eventually will transition into a fifth dimension where we don't need any of that stuff. So those are some examples. I mean, there are cars that drive themselves now. There are people in the world doing amazing things like telekinesis, me doing energy transfer work. There's a guy in Russia who I haven't been able to track down yet, but he is teaching people how to actually regenerate organs in their own body. So if an organ goes bad, you can regrow it yourself. So these things are not just technology-based, but also consciousness is accelerating, and as it is, our ability to do things that at one point would have been impossible for us to do, because as a global civilization, anyway, there are always individuals who are very advanced in society, but we're now heading into a future where all of us will become advanced. So that's some examples. Those are some examples of fourth dimensional world coming into manifestation. If you live long enough, you see some signs of the fifth. I mean, in our organization, we're sort of moving toward helping people move from the third to the fifth, keeping in mind that we can't really fully move into the fifth just yet. So, any other questions? I took a lot of borrowed time here, but I'm going to let Barb tell you a little bit about herself. So I want to give you a quick introduction. So I met Barb some years ago, and she came to an event that we were doing early on in our organization, before energy transfers or any of that existed. And so nowadays, I'm very fortunate that my entire dimensional reality is this. I really have no perception of what's going on in the rest of the world. In fact, unless I happen to go on Facebook and notice somebody's post about something insane going on in the world, I have no idea that I'm actually living in a somewhat insane world. I had no idea who won the election until somebody told me. And nor do I care about those sorts of things. So I live in a very different dimensional reality these days. My entire world is surrounded by incredibly gifted, brilliant people in all walks of life. And I love that I get to surround myself with people like that. Now, Barb is very exceptional because her ability to see energy fields is different from anybody I've known. Those of you who've heard of Edgar Casey may be familiar with his ability to see energy fields, and I believe her ability is equal to what he was able to do. And if you hear some of her stories of what she's capable of doing, they're very similar to what Casey would describe. There are a lot of people today who are starting to see energy fields or can see energy around people and objects and trees and things like that. So that's pretty common. But to be able to see it to the degree that she can is still very uncommon. It will become more common, but we're starting to witness a lot of very exceptional pioneers in the world who are able to do things, who are standouts, who are exceptional in that particular area. But eventually, it's a sign that we are heading into a future, the fourth dimensional reality, where more and more and more people are that's just going to be a normal thing for them. So I'm going to let her tell you a little about herself and her abilities, and then we'll start.
Well, before I talk about me, I'd like to talk about Michaela. Today, when she was channeling, she was radiating the yellow of the sun. Not any color that's here, but it was such a brilliant yellow, and it was pulsating like she was just. It was like the energy of the sun was inside of you. And when she was channeling different ones, your hand changed. One hand was your hand, the other hand was not your hand. And it changed with different guides that came in. It changed different. I'm going, am I seeing this? When I was watching your hands change, I always see the expressions, the different ones. I could tell that way. But you were on fire today. That's, so it was, you calmed down, you've got a white glow about you, right now, and you've got a healing green and yellow, colors. It's like they're just saying, okay, we just wanted to give you all this stuff, so now we're just going to give you a good, nice relaxation. We have a lot of lavenders and greens in the room, which both are in the healing arts. There's a few yellows, like I am, and Ethan is partly, around the room, and yellow's the innocence, is the oldest and youngest of the aura colors. And it's funny that you're sitting like diagonal at each other, that these two back there. And the others are mixed with lavenders and greens, which they're all, there is not a bad color. But, because we're all light workers, in some way, because you wouldn't be here if you weren't, interested in improving your life in some way or shape, we tend to generate people with those colors more than we do others. So, let's see. I was a preemie. I was a 7-month baby. I was 4 pounds. I went down to 3. I was 21 inches long. My mother said I looked like a starving child from Africa, She said, oh, it was with skin and bones. And I was in an incubator for a month. And back then, and it was just back in the 40s, I made my doctor famous because I lived. Now it's like, they have little babies that are in hand and they could make them live. But back then, they didn't have the technology. So they put me in an incubator and they had oxygen in there. Well, if you know anything about oxygen in an incubator in a confined space, it tends to destroy your eyes. So what I did was I put a red overlay over my eyes. And it's been, it's other people have seen auras have seen that. And it's a conscious decision between a child from birth to 3 years old for one of 3 reasons. One's rape, incest, one is some type of other, abuse, and the third one was to protect yourselves, that out of something for harm way. Now, there's no way that I could survive this life if I hadn't protected my eyes, because I've used my eyes and my hands, and I've always had these, different gifts. I've always wanted to touch people, and I never knew why. I mean, my father had Bell's palsy, and he told me he was in trouble, and I just did some work on him, and through a couple days it was gone. So, I have a healing hands, healing abilities, and I've always seen auras, but I call them glowing. And I've always told everyone, I said, when you turn on a light switch, light comes on. Are you going to talk to anybody about that? No. So you turn it off, it goes off. You say, hey, look at this. Everyone think she's loony. So, I always think people glowing. But since I was an only child till I was 6, and I'm actually kind of like a Benjamin Buttons. I was a baby adult. I learned to read myself at 3, went to school at 4, became a third parent at 6. At 10 years old, I was taking care of my brother. We had a vaporizer going into the crib, and somebody had to stay up and make sure it didn't, dry up. So that was my responsibility at 10. And in my teenage years, I was helping bring money in, to help, a little bit with the finances of the parents. I felt like I was a third parent, and then got married at 20. And of course, when you're kind of pushed into situations, it was like really kind of negative there, for a while, but I managed. What changed my life is I learned sign language in 6 months fluently through the deaf people. And this is getting off a little bit different than I normally talk, but that changed my life and made me, if I said, I'm not stupid, I'm not incapable, and you didn't do me a favor by marrying me, so therefore, I'm a smart person, and it made me really hungry to grow in other ways. So then I started taking all these classes, and during one session of going to therapy, I found out that this glowing that I had was actually called auras. And that's because she had her little part of her was jumping around a bulletin board, and I was laughing at that, and she said, well, she said, what are you laughing at? And I said, well, it's like this little mouse that keeps jumping around the board. And she said she dreamed that she was in the land of 2, and that she used that little object to help her understand what people were talking about. And I goes, so you're more interested in the bulletin board than listen to me. And so she told me it was auras. I said, okay, so I read about it. But I also learned the hard way about, because like I said, I called it glowing. One of my coworkers came up to me one day, and he came running up to me, and he looked really scared. And I'm looking at him and thinking, and then I said, what's wrong? And he wouldn't talk to me, and then he took off, and I thought, he's not glowing. Uh-oh. So I didn't know why he wasn't glowing. So I went and hunted him down, and I found out he went to the men's bathroom and died. I thought, ooh, if you're not glowing, you're going to die. So after that, every time I got an airplane, I wanted to check with pilots and co-pilots. Because if they weren't glowing, I wasn't going. They were going to kick me. I was kicking and screaming, no way. But it came in really handy one time. We were coming back from Vegas, and the plane went and dropped about 500 feet. Things are falling out, and everything's dropping down, and people are screaming, and kids are crying and everything. And I looked around at the airplane, and I said, "Oh, you're all glowing. You're going to be just fine." It calmed the plane down, and when we landed, everyone's cheering, and then I got a lot of that boys, So yeah, and then like I said, after that, when I learned what the colors meant. Then after I studied under Barbara Bowers. I actually went to her class, and she goes, I'm sitting in the back and I'm real quiet and I'm just looking at everything, and she goes, "Oh, you see them too, don't you?" You know, I said, yeah. So then I was the example, just like Barb, you know, okay, all right, you know. I didn't need to be the center of attention, I was there to learn, but seems like that happens every so often, you know, I get into that. So yeah, I went to this function, it was a raw food potluck with, you know, a friend, and before I left, I looked at him and I said, I gotta talk to this guy. And so they said, well, why do you gotta talk to him? I said, well, I just do. So then I started opening everything up, because I told him, I said, you have the largest aura I've ever seen. And I equated him like a spiritual master, like Gandhi or something, because it was like huge. And I mean, it just seemed like everybody was so happy around him, you know, and just, you know, I walked into this such a, you know, I mean, besides the food, and I know food is energy and food is life, you know, and I know that's important, but it was different from just the food. It was just like this well-being, you know, I mean, ever since I've been around him, I've been happier, and I've had, you know, people cut in front of me, go right ahead, I don't care, you know, you know. I'm just gonna stay out of your way, you know. And before I go, you know, so you know, it's changed, you know, and so anyway, I told him, and then he tested me in more than one way and more than one day. And I know at times he thought, oh, but I proved it to him. If I can prove it to a left brain, you know, then I know what I'm doing. And I guess I'm pretty successful. So that's just a little bit about what I have to say.
Anyone have any questions for this?
Yes, through your energy work, are you able to see disease and things like that?
Yes, at times I have. I mean, I worked, actually, a doctor wanted me to work. He was ones that stick the needles in. Acupuncture, yeah. He wanted me to work with him because he wanted to be able to see if I could see what he was, you know, doing was, you know, working the blood flow to get the disease out. But I was working too many hours then and I couldn't do it. I have seen it. We're not allowed to diagnose, you know, I have seen it. I actually had a beautician that I worked with, she had throat cancer, and she said, the doctor said I can't work, and she's Barb, I gotta work, and so I gotta keep this hair salon going, so I said, you'll work, so I did energy work with her. This is before I knew what I was doing, but I knew, intuitively, when you have these gifts, you know what to do, you know, and I just allowed the higher powers, or whatever it was, to go through me and called up Mother Earth and, you know, and the beings that are out there to help me, just guide me through to know what to do with her. I kept her working the whole time. The doctor was shocked. And when she was done with her chemo, I took this beautiful amethyst cluster, besides I worked with other crystals too, and I put it on her neck, and I was holding points, and I watched all that chemo stuff go into that rock, turned it black, and it shattered all over the room. Now, I didn't expect that to happen, but I'm going, well, took care of that rock, didn't I? But she worked several more years, and then she retired. She used to own the main entrance. It was on Waterford on M59 before Elizabeth Lake Roads. So that's just one thing. But yeah, I have seen it.
So do you hear, or do you just see? I mean, with that chemo and you put the rock there, were you told?
I saw the rock turn black.
No, were you told to put the rock there?
I felt that that's where it was supposed to go, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. They kind of talked to me. I mean, you know, I had one that wanted to go home with a friend of mine. So, this necklace that I have, this one right here, it talked to me up north and told me I was supposed to take it home. So, you know, so I mean, you know, they do it.
I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but I would imagine having your abilities just walking into a room, you know a lot about the people in the room, and I'm wondering, turning it on and off isn't exactly it. How do you internally deal
Okay.
with all of that information?
When I realized what all the colors meant, and my mother told me, she says, Barb, she says, you are more moral than I'll ever be. And I didn't really understand it until it's a responsibility knowing the colors, and I don't want people to feel, oh God, what's she seeing? So I learned to, like, how you have a dial, you turn it down. I learned to turn it down so that I'm not, I see everybody's glowing. I love the word glowing anyway. But I have to look harder, to tell the colors down, because I learned to train my brain to go down, because I want to be able to look at you when you want me to look at you, not take advantage of knowing things that perhaps you would prefer me not to know. And that's me. Now, other people have said that, I would use that all the way for, anything I could get, over people, but I can't. I don't feel right about that. It's, it's kind of like when I learned sign language. And, it's like, he wants to tell you something and neither one of you speak the same language. And I'm the interpreter between him and you. I have to convey what he's saying to you and convey to what you're saying to him. But that's your conversation. It has nothing to do with me. So once I'm done with my hands, my brain channels the hands for between the two of you. But then the brain only is working on the words and the signs, and then the rest of me is totally removed. So I use that same concept on once I learned the colors, to use the same concept, what I did with the deaf. Take my brain in the hands and just turn the dial down so I'm respectful.
So your mother was right.
Yeah.
You're more appropriate.
Does that answer?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Anyone else?
What's your last name?
Morey.
Anyone else?
Are we all glowing?
Yes, you are.
Okay,
You're all
yeah,
glowing.
We're all gonna
Yes.
make it home, right?
We can eat lunch.
Would you tell us if we weren't?
Yes, I would. As a matter of fact, I would be calling 911 to try to save you, because I did have another coworker that had a heart attack and he went down, but he was still glowing. It was 3 a.m. We didn't have 911 yet, but we had a fire station 2 doors down. So I said, somebody knows CPR, we can save him. And I ran 2 doors down and banging on the door at 3 a.m. The guy opens up the door. He's really mad at me. We don't answer doors, we only answer phones. Ring. I said, there's the phone. Answer it 2 doors down. My coworker saved his life. So then he wanted to go back to work. And I said, you're going to the hospital, man. You had a heart attack. So yeah. If anyone was glowing, I would definitely, see what we could do,
Walking Dead, that's why we go.
Yeah. Yeah, no knives to the head.
Let me look at my car and see if it's gonna make it home.
No, I don't. Car's an inanimate object. You're the one that's driving it.
Do you see auras around plants and animals?
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah. I always check my little girl, my kitty, and make sure, see how she's feeling every day. Some days she's not feeling so good, and other days she's, so I give her a lot more attention when she's not. So, yeah. And I my other cat got cancer. I was taking care of my father, and she got cancer while I was gone. So when I came back, and I noticed that she had an off color to her, and I actually diagnosed the cancer. I didn't know for sure. I told the doctor. I made him take a picture of her lungs, and I asked the doctor. I says, what? I says, she's got this thing in her lungs. I need you to take some pictures. And he took it, and he says, you had tumors in her lungs. I diagnosed it. I'm not trained, but she just wasn't acting right. And then found out she had cancer. So, but I didn't trust him by that time. $2,000 later, and I'm diagnosed with my own cat, So, anybody else? All right. Okay.
So we'll do the energy transfer, and so during the process, I'll play a little music in the background. For those of you who are new, so all you need to know is that I'm going to. Oh, yeah, right. I forgot. We do collect donations to pay for the rental of the venue, so if you haven't already donated, please do so. There's no requirement to do so. If you don't have money, don't worry about it. So, what you need to know is that my physical body is specially prepared for this process, and all throughout my life, I've been doing this even without my conscious awareness, although we've been doing it for about 5 or so years consciously. You can't do any harm to me by sending negative energy to me, and Barb would be able to see it anyway. So she can see the energy coming from each of you to me. So I'm going to ask you to, at a moment, to focus on sending your negative energy, your karmic energy to me, and the benefit to you is you won't be carrying it home with you after you leave, but neither will I. So it will disintegrate as it hits my energy field. And at the same time, I'm going to be sending a white light to your heart center to raise your consciousness, and we will be able to see a change in your aura in that process as well. So the more often you come, the more beneficial it is to you. Barb says that people who, well, what's everybody's aura level right now?
Well, I mean, it's varied, I mean, some of us are all through the ceiling, and your aura is really strong, it's about just below that pipe.
Well, that's surprising.
Yeah, but they're all going to go higher once we get done with this.
The effect is cumulative, so the people who come more often tend to have auras that are a lot bigger. So the more often you participate, the better it is for you. So we're going to do that circular process. Barb will be walking around, taking a look at everybody's energy field, and will let us know when we're done. And then we can answer any questions after that. Any questions before we start? And you also don't have to worry that your negative energy is going to hit somebody else on the way to me. There's a collective consciousness that facilitates this process through this body. So they will make sure so they're facilitating it. They will make sure that no harm will come to any of you in this process, and it will just come directly to me. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, and I'll play a little music in the background. And I want you to focus your mind on anything in your life that's causing you stress or negative emotions. Or just say a prayer to your higher self or whoever you ordinarily pray to and ask that any karma or negative vibrational energy that you're ready to release today be released to me. And you can, if you'd like to visualize it, you can visualize that as a dark cloud leaving the top of your head, send it to mine. You keep doing that until we ask you to open your eyes. Or you can just simply sit with the intention of releasing that energy, and this collective consciousness will facilitate it for you. At the same time, I'm going to be sending a white light from my heart center to yours to raise your consciousness and to shift your level of dimensional awareness that you're experiencing in your reality. So I'll play a little music now, and I'll be silent until we're done. If you are sensitive to energy, you might have felt a sensation, but whether you did or not, the effects are still there. We've done this for many years, and with people who are not energy sensitive to those who are very much so, we can always see the results. And we've measured that through a variety of different means that Barb can see. So, anyone have anything they want to share, or any experiences they had, or?
I felt like something coming on my finger. It's being tortured. Oh, shoot me a lot of stuff.
Very good. Very good. Anyone else?
Now, can you feel it though?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't feel it as anything negative, but I do feel it, yes.
You do feel like a motion coming to you?
Yeah, whether it's in person or remote, I can always tell. I have I can't really describe it. It's just I feel it in my head, just a little sense. The instant you start sending it, I will feel it. But it doesn't feel like anything adverse, and there's no adverse effect to me. I mean, I will go home feeling the same way I did when I got here. So, but yeah, I do sense it. I'm not typically energy sensitive though, but I do feel that. Just part of the process, because of how my physical body is in this life, I don't feel energy from others. So some of you may feel energy from each other or from different environments. I don't feel that. It's because I can facilitate this with thousands of people, and if I was that sensitive to energy, it'd be very hard for me to do that. Anyone else?
Is feeling lightheaded kind of a common experience?
Yeah. Everybody's different. As unique as your physical body and your energy body is to someone else, your sensation of it will be different. Some people cry for no reason, or at least no conscious reason. Some people will laugh, others fall asleep, others feel vibration, others feel temperature change. Some feel heaviness in their head or lightheadedness. Everybody's different. It doesn't, and if you felt nothing, that's okay too. It doesn't really matter. It's just for you to know that something happened. But not really. The sensation is not important. Anyone else?
Similar to what I experienced during meditation nowadays, my meditation changes over time, what I experience with it. and that is, it's nothing new, but thoughts of doing something that is passionate in my life, and what priority do I need to focus on so I can get there and be able to do that. And then I did have an interesting idea about how to remodel my basement.
Well, one of the side effects of this, as I said, is we made a slight shift in your dimensional awareness. You may not at the moment be conscious of that, but as you start living your life in the weeks, days, and weeks ahead, you will start noticing differences. And the more often you do this process, the more significant that difference will become, and the more that dimensional awareness will shift to where your lives will look dramatically different in the future from this pivotal point. So, and in many cases, a lot of spiritual gifts will start to open in many people. Sometimes just from one of these sessions that can happen. But yes, it'll start to uncover. Part of the reason for those of you who may not feel like you're really following your own life's passion and mission is because you're carrying this dense energy that's preventing you from doing that. And there are many environmental factors such as electromagnetic fields and chemtrails and GMO foods and all these kind of things are preventing you from realizing who you came here to be. This process will remove those blocks and will also raise your awareness and shift your consciousness so that you see opportunities you didn't see before. So I do hear from a lot of people who come to our events in the past who suddenly have gone off on some entirely different direction, something that makes them happier and more fulfilled. So if remodeling your basement does that, then
Well, this time I noticed, as I watched the energy, it's like all of a sudden everybody was sending you healing energy, and then it turned to white, and that's when I knew it was done. Everybody was done, it was all cleared. And then when I looked out, everybody was glowing. Just all of a sudden, they were just everybody was a big burst of glowing. It was like you were all connected in one big glowing glow, like if it was a snow globe. All of a sudden, you all were like jumped up and going, wow.
I saw that too right at the end. There was like a collective energy at the end. So
Right.
It was like everybody came together. So I saw that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw like everyone came together as one collective. That's what it was.
Right. It just seemed like we were all family with that last little bit,
Yeah, it was cool.
That was very cool. Every time it's different,
yeah. I've been noticing your descriptions are changing in the last 6 months or so. And that it used to be very dark. When we started doing this work, seemed like there was a lot more darkness.
Yeah, there was. Yeah.
It's not quite so much. So there's obviously a bigger shift in consciousness happening in the world. Or we're just attracting more consciousness.
Well, it always starts out,
Right.
it always starts out like dense or dark, but it just seems like, it's been, the last few times, you've been kind of like, it's like they're blessing you back, they're trying to send you back some, and today it was a really bright lavender and then the white, but then everyone seemed like we were connected. It was, wow.
Anyone have any questions?
I saw a huge Anunnaki. There was a huge female Anunnaki being that was present in your. I always see Muhammad, who's your guide, but I don't think we talked about that in one of the sessions about Anunnaki. That I don't know. There was this huge female Anunnaki being that I saw here in the room towards the end, like when we saw the collective. Towards the end, it was like assisting.
Yeah.
If you're curious, there are videos online of. Michaela mentioned Muhammad. Muhammad is, she says he's always with me. So when I have an office in my house where I work a lot, and she's always sees him standing there next to me. So he's the primary guide that facilitates this process. There's a huge collective that facilitates the process, but he seems to be the voice that comes through. So I did a channeling session with Michaela. It's online on YouTube, where I had an opportunity to speak with Muhammad and talk about the process that's happening here, and also some of the other guides that I work with. So if you're curious about that, then you can just search for Ethan Fox Energy Transfer, I think, and you should be able to find it.
So I have a little bit of a technical question. You talked about 3D printers before. Do you think that'll replace marijuana dispensaries in the future?
Well, I mean,
Inquiry.
that's a, you're asking me a, intellectual question, right? Well, well, of course. I mean, you can 3D print anything, right? At some point, so it shouldn't be a problem 3D printing any kind of herb or supplement, and at a certain point you won't even need to. But
Well,
sure.
the question of the energy in that resultant item, is an
Oh,
interesting
well,
one too.
Well, part of the problem right now with 3D printing, something that is organic, is that it doesn't taste or look quite, I mean, it looks like the original, but it doesn't quite taste right. So obviously there is something missing. But I imagine that'll be solved before too long. So, I don't see any reason why there'd be a limitation to doing that with anything. So,
I have a question. Mohammed, like the one we hear about now, Mohammed with Muslims, that's what it's related to. His written history is that he's really not such a good character.
yeah.
What happens when that person is guiding you?
Oh, I don't know that it's at Muhammad. Actually, I don't think it is.
Oh, you don't? It's not the same?
It's not the same.
Okay.
No, it's not the famous classic. Yeah.
Okay.
No, Muhammad was my teacher in many lives, I guess. In my conversation with him, he was my spiritual master for many lifetimes.
Okay.
And so now he's with me in astral form.
I see. Okay. Separate.
Yeah, it's not the same Muhammad.
Okay.
I don't know if I ever asked that question, but I never got the impression that it was the same one.
Okay, I was just curious about
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. Anyone else?
When you see the density, are you aware of content and meaning of that, or is it just all purge?
For what I do here, I don't get in deep. If I did a one-on-one session with you, I would get in a lot deeper and see what's going on, but no, I just try to keep it very general.
Anyone else?
Because you might not want her to know what I could see,
Right.
and that's your private business.
Sure.
So that's how I treat it. Is each person's individual, and some people I don't care. All right, just this is the way I am. Ta-da! Share the world like me.
TMI.
Other
Too much
people might,
information.
Other people go, don't. They are even uncomfortable. What are you seeing?
Sure.
I'm not seeing any more than you want me to see. So you have to allow it too.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a two-way street. You have to relax and allow me to, it's just something that worked together. And my sessions, I don't do too often. And they actually had to hunt me down at the expo to do them. They had a couple people hunt me down. And so then I sat with them, and it's a conversation, and I was doing, the colors, what I was seeing, and I was, giving them descriptions. And even my class, I had 60 people, I think, that I gave each one of a little mini reading, so.
Barb's a reluctant light worker.
Yes, I am. Well, I'm retired, gosh, I worked 42 years and 5 months, I've worked my whole life. Now I want to be that kid that I never was, so.
Burned it.
Yeah, but I will do it, and I just,
42 years and 5 months, but then who's counting?
Yeah, that's right. That was just at the post office.
Anyone else? Questions? Thank you. We still have half an hour, but
Well,
we can finish early if you.
No, I have a question. When did you start? I mean, you said that you've had experiences throughout your life, but when did that one pivotal point come when you couldn't explained you knew you were not doing what you should be doing? When did that happen?
Well, I think most people, as in my case, when you know there's something bigger you're supposed to do, you always know. But so throughout I was born in India. Came here when I was 5. I grew up in a very conventional household. My parents were both in medicine. And much like in Michaela's case, my family has no comprehension of the reality I live in. And they don't relate to it, and I really don't know what they think about it, but I know that they don't understand it. So that was the world that I grew up in. But as soon as I got out of that environment, and I always had people who were interested in spiritual things, very gifted healers and intuitives, even from when I was very, very young. And from that point that I was on my own and not as much under the influence of my family, a lot of psychics and intuitives I met over the years told me that I was going to do something someday. And now, at the time, though, I was raised in a conventional household, and where the only thing that mattered was being successful and making money. And so, from that vantage point, I had no concept of someday you're going to do something, And so I just sort of put it on the shelf, didn't think about it, but it happened all throughout my life. So I always had this perception. Now, about 24 years ago, I started studying astrology and numerology too, and I could see in my future that I was going to do something. So I always had that perception also. But again, knowing that intellectually and actually doing it are two different things. And now, there were many unusual things that happened all throughout my life also that I could not explain rationally. And I had an awareness that I had an ability with energy from a very young age, even though I, again, sort of dismissed it as that didn't really happen. So,
Example of?
Well, I used to charge up batteries with my hands.
Okay.
And I used to start cars that couldn't start by putting my hands on them. This was before I believed in any of this. I mean, I always had a fascination for it, but I had no real belief in it. And I used to work for a property management company some 15, 20 years ago. And so one of the properties we managed, they had 160 some odd apartments. There was this one woman who lived there who had some very serious health problems, but she liked to talk. So every time I went into her apartment, she would just talk and talk and talk. And so one time I'm in there, and she was telling me about this migraine headache that she had, and she said that it gets so intense that she goes blind. And sometimes she's driving down the road and she suddenly goes blind and has to somehow drive over to the edge of the road before she gets in an accident. So I'm in now. Keep in mind, I don't believe that I have an awareness that I have an ability, but I don't have a belief that I have an ability. So at that time, what went through my head, which happened many times throughout my life, so this is just one story, I had this awareness that I could do something for her, but I had no belief that I could do it. But at the same time, I felt like if I don't do it, she ends up getting in an accident on the highway because I didn't do it, then I'm always going to regret that I didn't do it, so I decided to do it anyway. And so now, I knew that she was very mainstream, had no belief in any of this, so that was also a challenge. But, on the other hand, she likes to talk, so I told her, why don't you just keep talking, let me just stand behind you for a few minutes. And so I stood behind her, and she's just yakking. And about a half an hour later, and I asked her, well, tell me what's going on with your headache. And so she's describing it, moving around in her head. And then suddenly it was this little pinpoint, and then it was gone. So I said, okay, great, she's fine. I left. And I didn't think anything of it. So in my mind at that moment, I thought, coincidence. it just must have gone away on its own. I had nothing to do with it. So the next morning, she is calling me in our office before we even opened, and calling my pager, and I didn't respond. Back when we actually had pagers. And finally, she gets through, and she is just ecstatic because now she had been using a walker or a cane to walk. She didn't need one anymore. She couldn't lift her hands above her shoulders to wash her hair, so she had to wash her hair in the kitchen sink using the little spray head. She could lift her hand over her head. She had more energy than she had in many, many years. So over the course of several months, she stopped taking a lot of her medication, felt great. Migraine headaches went away. So different things like that happened. And that was just one time. Now, I thought, wow, that's really cool. But again, I thought I couldn't possibly have done that. So there were many instances like that. Now, there was a time, this is when I first realized I had this ability. I mean, that happened long before this, but this is the first time I actually did an energy transfer, and which is why I later on realized I had the ability to do it. But it was, there were these two women I met, and again, I went through much of my life having all kinds of very fascinating things happening to me or around me without acknowledging or accepting that they were really happening. So thinking it was just coincidental. And so I met these two women who turned out they were soulmates of from my past many lifetimes, and we found that out because we used past life regression hypnosis, and we also worked with other intuitives. And so I'll give you an example. I had this close friend who was an intuitive, an intuitive channel, not quite like Michaela, but she could see past lives. And so these two girls and I, who were my soulmates, we regressed one of them into a past life where we both lived in Pompeii, or we three of us lived in Pompeii, and in the end, the volcano exploded, everybody died. But what was fascinating about that is I had a session with my friend who was the past life intuitive a week later, and she saw the exact same life. Neither of them knew that had happened. But anyhow, there was an instance I had with one of these women where she told me when we first met that she had seen, she had this recurring nightmare all throughout her life where she and her family, she had all sisters, and were in a very violent situation. And this, when she met me, so in her recurring nightmare, it had occurred all throughout her life. No one else ever appeared in this nightmare except her and her sisters. There were never any new characters until she met me, and then suddenly I started showing up in this nightmare, except that I rescued her from the situation. Now, we didn't know what that meant at the time, but what happened later on in my interaction with her is there was one time where I gave her a hug and something passed on over to me. Now, I was not somebody who would feel energy, but there was no question that I had just taken on something from her. Didn't know what it was. But her nightmare went away. Never occurred again. So we can say from that something of a karmic nature she had been carrying throughout her life that she couldn't deal with was passed on to me, and now she didn't have it. So that's kind of what happened for you today. But what else came from that is, so I went home after that experience, and the next morning I woke up in a state of bliss, which I had never experienced at that point in my life. And it was, and if you've ever experienced something like that, I can't really describe it, but everything was, colors were more vibrant, smells were just amazing. Everything in my physical experience was just that much more intense. And I had this sense of love and peace and happiness that I didn't really care about material things. I could lose everything, didn't really matter. So I tried very hard to hold on to that sensation. It only lasted for about a day and a half, and it went away. But I had a sensation then that was a sign of something to come, that I was being shown a window into my future if I stayed on my path. And so that experience, the bliss, happened again at the end of 2010, which was when this whole thing started. And except that time it lasted for 6 months. So I had this 6-month period of time in a heightened state of awareness, during which the idea of flower of life came into being, and a lot of the beginnings of what we later ended up doing happened. So it happened. I mean, those are just a couple of stories, but there are many other things. But it happened as a series of experiences throughout my life that were all interconnected. But what was the single catalyst of personal experience would have been that bliss state in 2010, that awakening state. But there were a lot of many other catalysts along the way to Barb, for example. And,
I guess I kind of pushed you over the edge.
Yeah. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, when did you say, I'm not doing what I do anymore?
What you did.
Yeah, what you did. I mean, like the work that you were doing at the time, you say, I'm not doing this.
That was a hard decision in some ways and not so hard in others, because partly my life didn't give me a choice. So now in numerology there are 9-year cycles. Every 9 years your life starts over, and in some cases it's more intense than others. Now I was at the end of the cycle when that happened, so I was about to head in a new direction anyway. So at that time in my former life, I owned a marketing, creative, branding agency. Very successful, made lots of money. I ran an international trading organization, and I taught professional traders. In fact, I was about to put on a trading expo at that time before I moved in this direction. So, and I spent most of my days running my company and looking at screens with numbers flashing all day long, doing trades. So that was my world. And I'd been in a 9-year relationship at that time, and to a great extent, all of that collapsed. So my life had its own consciousness of where I needed to go. Now, when all that happened, so I went from having lots of stuff and money and material world success to the opposite of that. And I had a choice at that time, though. I could have very easily got a job at a trading firm or something, or whatever, and that was certainly available to me. Or I could have even continued the trading organization. But I made a conscious choice at that point. When you have a shift in awareness, which all of you have had today, which you may not yet realize, but when you have that, you suddenly don't see the world the same way. So when I had that blissful experience in 2010, on the other side of that, I wasn't the same person. I couldn't be a trader anymore. So what happened with me was I was fully aware of the fact that if I wanted money and success and material success, I could just very easily get a job or do a trading expo or 10,000 other things if that's what I wanted. But I also realized that wasn't who I was anymore. So walking away was not even a choice. There was no other way. I was just aware that I was not that person anymore. Now, that was the easy part. I mean, then going from there in faith to get to here was a difficult physical journey, because I had grown accustomed to a certain kind of lifestyle, and I had to surrender that lifestyle and that life. And so it was many challenging years to build this organization and in faith go in this direction when I really had no certainty of where it was going. So I think at a certain point you have to, when you notice the shift of awareness and you are conscious of the fact that where you have been going is not the right path for you, you have to take that leap of faith and go in a direction that you know is right for you. But only when you know. I mean, when you have an inner knowing that this is where I need to go, not try to force it necessarily. I guess I would explain it as, a lot of times they talk about how when there's a tsunami in a particular area, the animals head for higher ground. How do they know that? They just naturally flow with the currents of the energy. And whereas human beings are stuck in the middle of the tsunami, because human beings are very much, in many cases, detached from their higher awareness. When you experience a higher awareness, you just know. There's no question of, I'm going to just sit down here and drown like everybody else. You just know you're supposed to go. So it's more that you are in alignment with what is the vibration that you're heading toward. So if you feel that and you sense that, then you just have to do it. And that's what happened to me.
It had to be kind of scary to disconnect that world to move up.
Yeah, I guess, in hindsight, there were many times where, because I was so the scary part comes from the human side, the intellectual, left brain, rational side, that says, you had all this money and all this stuff, and now you don't. And so going down this path is not a path of that, of what you're familiar with. But at the same time, I had this higher awareness that pulled me toward it. So it wasn't a question of, I never even thought that I should go back to that former life. Not that I would have been allowed to, even if I wanted to, but I never even tried to. And even the gentleman who was here today, who was from that former world, he's always telling me how I need to go back and do that because they missed me, the work that I was doing in that world. And no one has done it that way since since I left. And so certainly if I wanted to, I could be very successful doing that, and I could have been back then. Had I chosen to stay, it would have blossomed into something really substantial. But I couldn't. I was being pulled towards something else. And had I not done that, I would have never met Michaela or Barb. They would have certainly never met each other. We've touched millions of lives around the world with the work that we're doing here in just the last 5 years, and millions more into many generations to come. None of that would have happened had I not been pulled. Certainly I would have made money, and I would have maybe made some traders rich, but the scope of that life was minuscule compared to what I've already done. Because of this path. Each of you has that in you, So if each of you were to live that kind of life, and I know you all have it in you, then imagine how much the world could change. A lot of people are so obsessed with Donald Trump being president or Hillary, that's not how you change the world. It doesn't matter who you vote for. You change the world by stepping into your fullest potential. If each of you in this world decided to do something that was so big that would ripple across many generations, you would do more to change the future of this country and the world than any president is ever going to do. Not that they have any power to do it anyway, but hypothetically if they did. So that's my mission now is to help as many of you realize that potential in you as possible. And I understand where that question is coming from, because you, as a lot of you, I'm sure, are not entirely feeling like you're doing what it is that you really feel called to do. And yet there is this fear of letting go of what is. But I can tell you, though, that if you take a step towards something that you feel is the right thing, the universe will always support you. There were many years where I had no money on this path to here. So I went from having lots of it to none, virtually none. In fact, I don't tell this story very much, but just to illustrate your point, Now, I used to be a sun gazer for many years, and so when you sun gaze, your need for food reduces substantially. Some sun gazers don't eat at all. And so I, even today, eat very, very little. And so there were many years where people on my team, like Michaela, would drop off groceries at my house because they were afraid I was going to starve to death. But it's because I went through this period of time where I had so little money that I reduced everything that I could, and food was one of them. So I went down to such a small amount of food that most people couldn't possibly survive on it. But so I reduced everything I possibly could in my life and lived a very, very minimalistic life, which I still do to a great extent. But I went from a very different life to that. So it was a choice that I made. But one thing I can tell you is we put on 4 expos and I had no money to do it. So first expo, I had no money. Second expo, I had no money. And yet we rent out entire floors of hotels to put on these events. Not a single one of them has broken even yet. So I still financed them. And yet we've done 4 expos. We rent out Hiltons and Westons, so these are not cheap hotels. So I can tell you that if you're on the right path, the universe will support that path. So you just need to choose and not have fear that you're going to fail, because if you're meant to do it, you're going to do it, and nothing's going to stop you. So, I mean, now we've got umpteen projects that if you knew the scope of it, you'd think it's, and a lot of times we have new members we have a much bigger team now than we ever did before. And most people are either shocked or astounded, or they think I'm crazy for the scope of things that I intend to do with this group. And it's impossible. It's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Where's that going to come from? I don't know.
Want to check?
But
Yes,
I can
we
tell.
do. Yeah.
Yes,
I'll
we'll take
answer
it.
that question. Yes, we do.
I can tell you, you're going to see a lot of big things out of us, and it's because when you just move in the direction that you're meant to go, everything will fall into place to support that becoming real. So don't get stuck in the fear. It's just, your own ego stopping you from the realization of your potential.
And your intuitiveness too.
Yeah.
And I just have to drop just a little bit about intuitiveness. My friend was driving a car, and we were at an intersection, and she was going to turn, and I said, "Stop! Don't turn!" And the car went, run through. We would have gotten hit. And I said, "Okay, you can move now." So it's just, you got to listen to that intuitiveness,
And you'll find that it's funny, I live in this world all the time now. I don't even know what the rest of the world is like, except every once in a rare while I have to step into a government institution or something to do something. And it's like I just got off a spacecraft and stepped onto some other planet.
Yeah.
Because I've been living in this world for such a long time. But as you do that, you'll find you'll attract people like that everywhere you go. I was in another country some years ago, and I hired an assistant there to just, because I didn't speak the language, to just help me out, buy groceries, take me places, translate for me, and it's funny, I didn't know anything about her. She was just somebody who was recommended, and so I was there for about a week. All throughout the week, we didn't talk about anything other than the day-to-day stuff that we were doing there. And so on the final day I'm there, she says, "Oh, you're an astrologer, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I am." She says, "Well, I'd be interested in that." I said, "You're really interested in astrology?" And I said, I didn't. She was so straight-laced. You would never expect she had any interests that were not mainstream. And she says, "Oh yeah," she said, "I have a guardian angel." And I said, I'm thinking, she's telling me this on the last day I'm there when I don't have time to talk to her. So I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, well, there was one time I was walking down the street, and I was reading something, and I was just very focused on it. And a voice in my head, and she said it was not me talking, there was a very loud voice that said, "Stop." And so she said, I froze with my right foot up in the air. And the voice said, put your right foot behind you. And so I put my right foot behind me. And then the voice said, look down. And I put down what I was reading, and I looked down, there was an open manhole cover right in front of me. So what are the chances that I would meet someone like that? You know, on a trip to somewhere, but this happens to me everywhere. So, because when you're tuning into a certain frequency or a certain dimensional experience, that dimensional experience is what reacts to you and what shows up in your experience. You can be living in the midst of war and chaos and whatever, and yet it is out there somewhere, but what is in your immediate reality is not that. It's what matches your own frequency. So you're a little bit different now too. So you're going to start noticing that in your reality as well.
Yeah, when the voices start talking to you. I was on the roof of my house, and I was throwing branches off the roof. I have a tri-level. And I did it for years. And all of a sudden I had a voice say, you are never to get on the roof again. And I froze, you know. I mean, I've only had that voice talk to me twice, you know. The first time was at a church, you know. But the second time I said, all right, just please let me get off of this roof. You know. But I mean, I think that's what you talked about, the dimensional stuff. I mean, you know, it was a very male voice and it was very loud. So they really got my attention. Now I'm not going to be stupid anymore. I will stay off the roof.
Yeah. This is kind of a picky question. The word dimension, you're using it as you're in a different dimension than most of the world most of the time. So that's over here, and then you're talking about third, fourth, and fifth dimensions where most people do not reside in the fifth dimension, but you're in a different dimension. Just talk to that. Do you consider yourself operating out of a fifth dimension most of the time?
Me, personally?
Yeah. Some people talk like, it's like, oh, I'm always in the fifth dimension. I don't do duality anymore. Yet I hear conversation like we just had today where maybe there's a range of people, obviously, that are more dense, that are more in fifth and
of course
oscillate. So just what do you have to say about that?
Well, first of all, I want to preface the answer to that question by saying don't get caught up in labels, because that's our, we're human beings. We live in a linear time universe or reality where past is past and future is future, and our left brain intellectual side in that material world wants to interpret everything and give it meaning, and it's that left brain that is also connected to our egocentric views of reality. Nothing wrong with ego. Ego is necessary to exist in this reality to an extent. So don't get caught up in the numbers so much or what meaning they have. But that being said, there are multiple dimensions, and not everybody is tuning into the same one. Now, when we talk about fourth, fifth dimension as a world, we're talking about the collective consciousness. So the collective consciousness is not currently existing in fifth dimensional awareness. If there was, then we wouldn't have phones with time on them. We wouldn't be thinking about past, present, and future. But at the same time, though, each of you are existing in slightly different dimensional awarenesses, and which means you're connecting to frequencies that are from different dimensions. So in this room, all the dimensions exist. And your body's vibration is allowing you to tune into information on multiple dimensions. So human beings are a little bit unusual from not all extraterrestrial races, but some extraterrestrial races are connected to one specific dimension. Humans are actually all multidimensional, at least we're capable of it. So as a human being, you can connect to multiple dimensions at any given time if you are developed to that point that you can do that. So it is possible that you could be fifth dimensional, in which case you are connecting to information or the vibration of fifth dimension, even if the collective is not. So you may be a timeless being existing in fifth dimension, tuning in fifth dimensional information and energy. Like when Michaela channels the ninth dimensional Palladians, she actually has to match the frequency in order to do that because they're on the ninth dimension, they're not here with us. So in order for her to receive that information, she has to adjust to that vibration. So in that sense, during those times, she's on the ninth dimension. All of you have the ability to shift dimensions to some degree or another.
Maintaining it, like you were saying, is we're just not in the physical body in order to maintain that.
Right, but your body is multidimensional, right? So yes, my physical body is in 3 dimensions, but my vibrational multidimensional body is, well, if you based on Michaela's channeling, is at 13th dimension. So I'm tuning in 13th dimensional energy into this reality, which is where the energy transfer comes from. So everybody's different. From what I understand, 12th dimension, some people are in 12th dimension. Majority right now are in, well, I shouldn't say the majority. Almost everybody who's conscious, or everybody who's conscious, at least at 5th dimensional connection at this point. There are some who are higher than that, some are 7th and 9th, and but very few in the higher ones. But it's sort of like my example earlier about cable television. All the channels exist. So there are people all over the world now. They're watching all different channels, but they're all on the same TV. Same channels are available. Whichever channel you've got playing is the dimensional awareness that you have. So if you watch a war movie, then you're thinking along that kind of vibration. If you watch a love story, then you're at that connection. So at any given time, you have the ability to switch those channels. Now, you may not have consciously the ability, meaning you may not be able to sit there right now and say, okay, I'm going to tune into 13th dimension. You may not necessarily be able to do that without the inner development to first be able to connect you to that dimension. But once you have that inner development, that connection is always available to you, and now you can tune into it anytime. So, does that answer the question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just this is all fascinating.
Yeah, it's a complicated subject, and again, you're asking a person who's sitting in a third-dimensional room, speaking to another third-dimensional room, to a person who's sitting in a third-dimensional room, to try to explain fifth-dimensional reality. So, when we are all at a collective fifth-dimensional reality, that explanation will be very different.
And then we won't need to talk about it.
And you won't need to talk about it, because you'll already know the answer.
It's all vibration.
You'll already know. In fact, it won't be even a knowing as you think of knowing today. It'll just be an awareness. So you can't rationalize or explain the laws of the universe from a perspective where those laws don't apply. So if you're a fish in the ocean, what's it like to fly out in outer space? No idea. And even if somebody from space were to explain it to you in words that made sense to the space traveler, it wouldn't make any sense to you. You'd hear something totally different. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where we are. So anybody who's trying to explain fifth dimension or 13th dimension or whatever dimension from a human standpoint, it's limited from what it really is. It's our rational minds maybe can comprehend some of it, but fifth dimension is not a rational-minded place. It's not a left-brain intellectual place. It is, or an ego-centered place. It's a totally different reality. So you'll continue to understand that. And one of the things I will tell you, though, is that answer to that question will come to you on its own, because as your consciousness raises through this process and other things, you will come to understand the answer to that. So even though I may understand the answer to your question on a level that you may or may not understand yet, I wouldn't know, you will continue that understanding on your own as your own awareness increases in a way that you will never be able to explain to somebody else. So part of that understanding does not come from me answering your questions, because there's no way I could possibly answer that question. It will come from you shifting in awareness to where the answers will continue to evolve inside of you.
And what is that 12-step thing? Keep coming back.
What's that?
I said, what's that 12-step thing? Just keep
Oh,
coming
yeah.
back. Keep coming back. I'll get to know I-75 pretty well.
Right.
I get a lot of questions in session from people about how to raise their dimension, because like they want to connect with beings or information, and they're like, well, how do I even get there? Because you can work both sides of it. You know, when you raise your dimension, you're going to magnetically attract all the things that exist on that dimension, like the people, the places, the things. But to get you there, you've got to consider you have to make those free will choices on the physical level to bring those things into your life. It's like inclusion, right? I include the people in my life who are existing in that frequency that I want to be in. Even like things like music, we don't think about. You know, music we listen to, the foods we eat, the water we drink. We create consciousness. We create ourselves as consciousness by all the things we include in our life. So quite simply, if you want to raise your dimension and have that access to those beings or more information, they exist in a love frequency, you have to equate a love frequency to everything that is you, you know, and everything that you decide to include in your life. And that's what kind of gets you there, and then you magnetically attract more of it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like taking Michaela as an example, she channels, and so she can sit up here and go into a trance and speak on behalf of, or they speak through her physical body. But all of you have the capacity to do that, and all of you are communicating with multiple dimensions already. The difference is that she has trained her physical body to translate that information. So everybody's receiving the information. What makes her different is that her physical body responds to it. And that can come with training. You know, training, practice in a particular direction. And then because you all have unique special abilities that are special to each of you. Not all of you should be channels, and not all of you should be healers. Some of you may see auras and others don't. Eventually we'll all be able to do all of that. But for now, for the most part, everyone's going to have some unusual, unique ability that's their own. And part of the process is to tune into that. The other part of the process is to do the physical, tangible things in order to be able to interpret that. So if you're all receiving energy from whatever dimensional connection you have, that energy is already coming through you. Okay? But in order for us to be able to see it, you're going to have to train yourself to translate that information into something useful in this dimension. What Michaela does is she brings multidimensional information or vibration, and she translates it into a tangible three-dimensional version that three-dimensional human beings such as ourselves can understand it and rationalize it. But actually what she's saying is only a tiny fraction of what you're getting, because she is speaking words that appeals to your intellectual mind, but in fact there is an entire packet of energy and other information that's coming through that you don't even hear, that is having a bigger impact on you than the words that she's speaking. So that is accompanying everything that she's saying, but means nothing to your three-dimensional version of yourself, but your multidimensional version of yourself is responding to that. So part of the process is not only becoming aware of it and developing it, but also training your physical body to be able to translate that energy that you're receiving into something that you can bring to the three-dimensional world so that we can benefit from it in some way. I don't know whose question that was, but anyone else? Anybody else? Okay, well, looks like we filled the time. It's 5 o'clock, so thank you all for coming.
Thank you.